It is really good to be here with you all this morning, to be with you here in this lovely sanctuary, and with those of you who are online. And thank you for all your patience this morning as I learn how you do things and try and fit my style of doing things into your way of doing things. And there's bound to be a few bumps in the road now and then. It has been so good these last 27 days to begin to get to know you as a congregation and as individuals, to hear about what brought you to the congregation and what keeps you here, to hear what your hopes are for these 2 years of interim ministry that we're going to have together, to hear what you think the challenges are going to be and what tools this congregation has to face those challenges. I have met with about 25% of you so far, sometimes in Zoom meetings and sometimes in person and sometimes online. But I would really like to meet with more of you. So please look in your e-blast or in the congregation's Slack space for ways to meet with me either one-on-one, again, in person or on Zoom, or in small groups. And I really want to pitch the small groups because the small groups are a great way to also get to know other folks here at UUI. And so please sign up for some of those small groups online. Through your stories, the ones that I've heard so far, I already have so much love and appreciation for this congregation that so many of you love. I have heard that time and time again. You love this congregation and you love each other. It is an honor to be your interim for the next 2 years. The relationship between an interim minister and a congregation is unique in that it occurs in what we call liminal or transitional space, between the tender goodbye and the tentative hello. Interim ministry happens when a congregation is full of feelings, full of change, full of we don't know what's going to happen. Regardless of the circumstances, when a minister leaves, there is grief. Grief over the loss of a beloved minister, sometimes grief over the circumstances of the transition, maybe grief over how the whole process was handled. And guilt and shame often figure in as well. You may ask yourself, did we do the right thing? Why would someone we trusted treat us this way? Why didn't what we want matter as much as we felt like it should? The end of a ministry, even a wonderful, loving end, has grief. And into that grief, here comes the interim minister. For UUI right now, that's me. I'll tell you, being an interim minister is not for the faint of heart. And I learned this many, many years ago as a lay leader myself, listening to the interim minister who came into my beloved congregation after a ministerial transition. My spouse and I had joined the UU congregation in Reston, Virginia as young professionals. Our children were not even a blip on our radar at the time. We came to church because we wanted multi-generational, theologically diverse community that would challenge us to be better, to live our values with more integrity, to help us think critically about the issues of the day and give us a place that would encourage us to grow and change. Needless to say, as a child-free young adult couple in our mid-20s, we were in a unique position in the congregation, and we loved it. We were youth group advisors in the choir and on so many committees, all the committees. I will forever be grateful for the eagerness with which that congregation welcomed and integrated my spouse and I into the community. But back to that interim minister. He started his sermon, his first sermon, by squaring his shoulders and saying, "We might love him or we might hate him, but he was pre-fired, and so he would speak the truth." Okay. Pre-fired, friends. Interim ministers are pre-fired. And tell the truth, he did. He pushed us. He used a form of tough love in that he required the congregation to take responsibility for our actions. He helped us to see how the congregation had played a part in the previous minister's leaving and helped us to own what was ours and let go of what was not ours. He wasn't as touchy-feely as our previous minister. His gifts were totally different. In fact, everything about him was totally different. And it was just what we needed to move on and be ready to welcome our next minister, or in that case, welcome our new co-ministers, something that the congregation never would have considered before his interim ministry. Beloveds, for you are already my beloveds. I have been hired as your interim minister. Let me state it unequivocally for you, though I won't square my shoulders or take a stance, mountain stance. I am pre-fired. My contract with you ends at the end of July in 2025. During these 2 years, my role is to help you get ready to call your next settled minister by helping you to talk about where you come from, to understand who you are now, and to envision and maybe even proclaim where it is that you want to go. Okay, let me back up a bit because I have just thrown a bunch of insider language at you. Hired versus called, settled versus contract. These are concepts that we will explore in more depth in the coming months, but let me explain very briefly. In our faith tradition of Unitarian Universalism, each congregation chooses how to govern themselves. This is called congregational polity. Polity basically just means governance. You gotta have a whole lot of fancy words when you're in church. One of the most important and sacred aspects of congregational polity is the right of a congregation to choose whomever you want as your minister. When a congregation calls a minister, it creates a covenant with that minister. I both love and hate using the metaphor of marriage here. It isn't marriage, but marriage is the ongoing covenantal relationship that most folks are familiar with. Once the minister has been called by the congregation, which requires a vote of the whole congregation, because democracy, that minister is said to be settled. The relationship between a settled minister and a congregation continues until either the congregation or the minister are ready to end it. Again, using the metaphor of marriage, divorce is never, ever easy, even when it is clearly the right decision. Beloveds, you have come to the end of a ministry with a dear minister who came from this congregation. Reverend Jamie was yours. He was your friend before he was your minister. You formed him, you shaped him, you turned him into the minister that he became, and you honored his call to ministry. Of course, it is hard to lose him. And at the same time, some of you recognize that it was time for him to move on to what was next for him. And time for UUI to move on to a new ministry, a new stage in the life of this congregation. So this change was welcome to some of you and very unwelcome to others. And because we are complex human beings capable of holding conflicting emotions at the same time, for some of you it was both welcome and unwelcome at the same time. You all are not on the same page. Some of you are deep in grief, and others are chafing at the bit, wondering what's next. Some of you are both of those and a whole lot of other emotions I probably haven't even named, and that is okay. It's okay. We'll work through it. As an interim minister, I am not called by the congregation. I was hired by your board. Kind of like a consultant. Interim ministry is a form of what's called transitional ministry, meaning that those of us in this role serve congregations that are in transition from one settled ministry or way of being into another. In transitional ministry, we have a defined set of tasks to accomplish in a defined period of time. You don't have an open-ended covenant with me like you will with your next settled minister, but a time-limited one. Kind of like how sometimes hand fasting is for a year and a day. But even better than a hand-fasted or marriage relationship is really the comparison of your relationship to your coach. In this case, the interim minister is like the congregation's life coach after a breakup. Together, we can target specific behaviors that will help you to be successful in relationships with other ministers in the future. Together, we will find ways for you to feed the healthy things that you are doing, starve the dysfunctional things that you're doing, and interrupt the harmful things that you are doing. And at the end of the coaching session, when you have taken everything we have learned and moved into that next phase of your life, we're done. We'll wrap it up. We'll celebrate this time that we've had together, and then we will move on. I am not here to tell you that you are bad. I am not here to tell you that you are irredeemable. You are neither of those things. I am not here to fix you. I'm not here to tell you that I am here to tell you that it doesn't matter if you have conflict in your DNA or not. As someone once told this congregation, because DNA does not define you. And besides, conflict is creative and can be what you need for growth. We're going to talk about all of this stuff more in the coming months. We have plenty of time at this point. But the bottom line is that you get to envision where you are going as a congregation, and it is my role to help you get there. Like the monarchs. This is important work, this getting you ready for your next settled minister. And it is more important now than ever. Because for at least as long as everyone in this room has been alive, there have always been more ministers looking for positions than there have been congregations looking for ministers in Unitarian Universalism, separately as Unitarians, as Universalists, and together as Unitarian Universalists. There have always been more ministers looking for positions, and so churches have always had plenty of ministers to choose from. But that's changing. For the first time in recent history, if not ever, we are beginning to experience a ministerial shortage. There are more congregations looking and fewer ministers available. So more congregations and fewer ministers. And this shortage is due to 3 factors: the retirement of baby boomers, burnout from the pandemic, and the pipeline of people going into congregational ministry not being able to fill the empty pulpits. We're going to talk about all of this and what it means for this congregation more. You're going to hear that a lot. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this, but we are going to talk about this more and what it means for UUI, because we are entering an unprecedented time of ministerial shortage. And so part of our time together isn't just to help you move on from the past, but to help you be as healthy and as attractive a congregation as possible so that you find the next wonderful minister for you. This means making sure that you have what ministers will be looking for: appropriate governance, robust programming, that you're grounded in living your values, and that you are financially stable. So, how do we do all of this? Because remember, y'all are the monarchs, right? Right now, so I am spending time getting to know you as individuals and as a congregation. And I am listening for patterns. I am looking for areas of health, and I am looking for your growing edges. I'm digging into your history. I will take everything that I have heard and learned, and I'm going to analyze it. It gets stuck in my head, and it churns around in there. I love this process. I love putting it all in there, and I love waiting to see what emerges. I love focusing and analyzing where the congregation is. It utilizes all my education, all my life experience, and is like putting together a 5,000-piece puzzle that's all one color. Moving pieces around and fitting them together, being able to pick up that piece I saw just a minute ago because it fits perfectly right there. So I take everything that I am hearing from you and what I know about you, and I analyze it, and then I connect the dots in ways that maybe you haven't considered before. And then this is when I begin to hold the mirror up for you. We human beings are so adaptable. In fact, we stopped noticing things when we are exposed to them repeatedly. So my job is to notice and to point out to you, gently and with love, what I am seeing. For example, pretend you didn't recycle here. You do. There's recycling. But let's pretend that you didn't. I might say, hey, UUI, you all are a green sanctuary, and you say that care for the earth is important to you, but I notice you don't recycle. Tell me about that. Again, you do recycle. This is a thought exercise. Now, I'm not going to say, shame on you, bad congregation. But sometimes it might feel to you like that's what I'm saying, because you might be really embarrassed about what I see. And I'm also not going to say, get a recycling program or else. And I'm not going to go out and get a recycling bin for you. What I will do is ask what you want to do. Would you like me to help you find ways to bring your actions more in line with your values? If you say yes, then we'll figure out the next steps together, and I will be with you, helping you, supporting you, providing resources and guidance along the way. And if you say no, I will help you understand the ramifications of that choice and what it might mean. The change has to come from you, from the congregation, because I am only here for 2 years. So any change that I might make from a top-down position wouldn't be sustainable after I leave. And heaven knows we're Unitarian Universalists. We don't like anything that comes from the top down. One of the things you will hear about from me sometime this winter is forming a transition team. This team will be made up of 5 or so members of the congregation who are widely known and respected, people who display healthy interpersonal boundaries and have clear perspectives into systemic church issues. The transition team's role will be to provide me, your interim minister, with insight about UUI that I could easily overlook, as well as organizational and facilitative talent and willing hands as the ministry proceeds. In many ways, the transition team will help shepherd the interim process from the congregation's perspective. So you'll hear more about that this winter. At this point, 27 days into my ministry with you, I am starting to get an inkling of some of the things we may want to work on in this interim period. What I can tell you so far is that besides working through the grief of Jamie and Suzanne's departure, most of it is really normal stuff that happens as a church grows. and things that need to shift to accommodate that growth. You'll hear more about this in the coming months. Being pre-fired gives me the freedom to speak the truth to you, even when it is hard. Actually, especially when it is hard. And I pledge to you right here and now that I will always speak that truth in love. Because I love church as an institution, and I love our UU faith, and I want UUI to be as healthy and thriving a congregation as you can be. Because I want you to be the congregation that this community desperately needs you to be here in Indianapolis, Indiana, right now. Because I want your next settled ministry to be successful and productive and transformative. Through all this, I will love you. I will joyfully companion you and minister to you through what is going to be hard sometimes. I will be honest and transparent with you. And sometimes you're not going to like what I have to say or how I say it. And sometimes you might not like me. And that's okay. It is. Because I know that we are going to do good ministry together. Because this congregation is fantastic, and it won't take much to get you ready for what's next. Transitions, even welcome ones, are difficult. They always involve some sort of loss, but we will journey together through this ministerial transition, through all the ups and downs that the coming months will bring. Life is a riddle and a mystery, and it will be hard sometimes, but we'll get there. I promise to help you be the monarchs that I know that you already are. May it be so. May we make it so.
Thank you, Reverend Don. My name is Jennifer Gatz, and I am the board president here at UUI. And I am here today to lead the covenanting with Reverend Don, between Reverend Don and our congregation. Reverend Don, we have asked you to journey with us during this time of transition in our congregation. We welcome you to our community, and we are grateful that you have chosen to be with us. Knowing that this time will be both joyful and challenging, will you now take up the mantle of transitional ministry with the members and friends of UUI? Will you speak the truth to us in love? And will you teach us to the best of your ability about what we must do to prepare ourselves for our next chapter?
I will.
Yay. I ask you, members of the UUI, will you support Reverend Dawn as she works with us, bringing to us her knowledge, skill, and care? Will you allow her, as our interim minister, to take risks, to make mistakes, and to ask for help when needed? Will you open your mind, heart, and hands to this ministry, embracing it with honesty coupled with kindness? Please respond, we will.
We will. I am excited to be on this journey with you into this time of transition, guided by our faith, our covenant, and the interim tasks.
Welcome to the journey.
Let us begin.